to something else. And we see the guardian angels above kind of bringing this about. So all of a sudden, we have the spirit of Britain with her Roman style helmet, and then we have the spirit of America with her Liberty cap. Maybe the forerunner to the Ku Klux Klan hat. And instead of the trident, she carries the sword. Either way, they're going to fight. So during the Revolutionary War, the fight was depicted as the mother fighting against the daughter, the native daughter. And as you see, of course, even after the war, they kissed and made up. But the idea was that our people, the Haudenosaunee people, were generally painted in history as being allies, if not subjects, to the crown. Not recognizing what Sue talked about is that we have a very serious split between our people. Half of them fought, we'll say, on behalf of the crown, half on behalf of Americans, but in reality, they're all fighting for our land. And of course, we want heroes to be heroic, so whatever history creates this image, like the Joan of Arc thing that comes out in 1918, there's many stories of heroic actions by women, and we don't want to discount those, but the imagery created sometimes usually is at the expense of somebody else. So in creating one hero, you have to then create a super villain. And in this case, this picture of a seaport here, where this changes the meaning about meeting a tall, dark, handsome stranger. Not quite what you may envision it to be. And so there's this innate prejudice, we'll say, towards the image making. Even though the event may be real, it gets exaggerated. This painting on the left came out in 1804, probably had more to do with this fear-mongering about the savage warrior than anything else. Now, it's true that Jane McCrae was killed. The Mohawks always said, we didn't do it, we came across and found her dead on a trail. Nobody knows for sure, but the painting fueled this animosity. But the parallels between the imagery of Native people and the imagery of women, of course, are very strong. And this other painting, I forget, it was a photograph from, I can't remember the date, 1911. So here we said, American woman and her political peers. Crazy man, somebody has mental deficiency, a native. These are all considered, in other words, women were castigated, as we know, as second-class citizens, but they hung around in that group. Today, what a group to be with. So if we look at this comparative imagery of the British coin with the Britannia then as the symbol of commerce, as we see on the coin, the American coin from the War of 1812, where it's the symbol of liberty, and our monograph that talks about the role of our women to pick our male leaders. And it's a very important thing. It's hard to explain quickly how different the role of women have in our old society and today, because they do pick the leaders and monitor them, and if the male leader doesn't do well, the women can oust them. And if you had the same kind of power, in the United States. So this inherited legacy of the women, however, was challenged severely during the War of 1812, where this rise then of warrior power, the male leaders that Sue talked about having to negotiate the future, and the women's voice kind of gets set off to the side. What used to be the primary voice of conscience. My dad, who served in the American Army in the Second World War, said, if the mothers of America had saw the conduct of their sons during war, there would be no more war. And I think it's very significant because that's what used to happen. But it changed. At the same time, then, this allegory that's created about both American destiny, British destiny, Canadian destiny, often ignores our destiny. If we were allies, what happened to us? Because we're not being crowned with the hat of liberty. Somebody else is taking over our backyard. This was a little box made to commemorate the signing of the Treaty of Ghent. It's very important because that says all rights, privileges, and possessions enjoyed by the native nations were restored to them after the war. They basically pressed the reset button because they couldn't wrestle with what is Indian land, what's British land, American land. So again, when we see, ironically, the spirit of the native, no different than it was 400 years ago, watching the British as they sign this treaty, and again, this kind of guardian angel is making sure that everything's done to the benefit of the Americans. But I'm guessing it is. And we try to find a few images, at least what Native women might have looked like. But again, we always have to be cautious as to what was depicted. Certainly we know that the women suffered the consequence of war more than anybody else, because it's their sons, their husbands, their fathers that are being killed. They're the ones being dispossessed, relocated. They're the ones who have to worry about the future. And you can imagine then, these women who saw this dislocation in the Revolutionary War were very reluctant to see it repeated again. So you kind of get a little bit of maybe some of that in some of this artwork. At the same time, artwork is a form of propaganda. Even during the war, this is the capture of General Winchester at the hands of the British. And I think I got a detail where you can see, first of all, we have this nursing native woman who seems to be quite happy to share this torture that was going on. This guy was captured, he was tortured, but he was tortured because of what he had done to the native people previous to this. And oftentimes this action requires the same kind of action, back and forth. One of the chiefs during the war said, the question came up, why are we slaughtering these Americans? Why are we killing them? Why are we scalping them? Why are we cutting their bodies up? And the chief said, well, that's what they're doing to our people. They stop doing it to us, we'll stop doing it to them. I'm not trying to rationalize that, but I'm also just comparing these two views of kind of loathe the poor Indian, this idea that we are vagabonds even in our own territory, versus the very kind of savage delight of the image on the left shows. In reality, most women are just like you, just trying to take care of their lives, and trying to take care of their families, and try to maintain a household. They're in this very tough period of transition, and so some of this artwork that comes from that time. And I'm going to leave a copy of this with you. You can show anybody if you want a copy. Because we don't often see these images. They've actually been hidden even from our history. These are what people looked like back then. They were, in this case, some Akwesasne and Mohawks. One of the consequences of the war, because of the Tuscaroras allied with the Americans, and they said they saved General Porter at one point, he granted the Tuscarora and Seneca women the right to go to Goat Island and to sell a beadwork. It was photographed from much later, though. That still goes on today. You go down to Niagara Falls, and you'll find the native women there selling beadwork. It was a consequence of the war that you're not going to find in the record, but it's still evidence there. We have one story about this woman. Her name is Aunt Dinah Jones. She actually served in the American military as a cook, which a lot of the native women did. There was probably about 24 of them and traveled with both the American and the British Army. And back then, I would say our warriors were mercenaries. They only fought if they got paid and if they were supplied. So there was a promise that the women would get paid. It took her over 70 years to get her just compensation from the war. So it's a whole other story about afterward. At one point, the Americans offered her a pay only if she would sign an oath of allegiance to the United States. And basically, to paraphrase her Onondaga, hell no, I'm an Onondaga. So they changed the law to allow Aunt Dinah to get her compensation, which ironically was only $8 a month that she got for the last few months of her life. But that attitude is what you find even in our communities today. Another story related directly to the war is Pauline Johnson. I'm sure you've heard about her, familiar with her. You can barely see in the photograph on the right, she has this wampum belt that she was using as a stage prop. That belt was actually given to us at the end of the War of 1812. Colonel William Klaus in 1815 gave us this belt. They said he studied all of the wampum belt designs, tried to come up with something to represent the relationship to the crown and the Haudenosaunee, the Six Nations. That's the belt he gave. There's a picture in the middle there. That's actually Pauline Johnson's grandfather is interpreting this belt. And it's the pledge of the crown that says that we will never interfere with your culture or your traditions. Okay, they didn't do too good on that pledge, but maybe we got the chance in the next 100 years to do something about that. The other part, though, is this very real situation we're in today. We still stay with the Haudenosaunee. We're still independent, we're still sovereign, we weren't defeated in the war. We travel on our own passport. This is a Joyce King, one of our Mohawk women. But 2 years ago, Queen of England was here in Toronto. She gave us these silver bells, and on one of the bells it said 1710 to 2010, the Silver Covenant Chain. That's one of our treaty bells. So the Queen was here recognizing the long-standing treaty relationship with our people. ironically, 2 months later, our Iroquois Nationals lacrosse team was trying to board a plane to go to England to play in the World Championship, and England refused to accept our passports. So apparently the Queen didn't talk to the customs people. So we're hoping this period of commemoration will get us back to some of those prior relationships where our people coexisted. It's not about war, it's really about peace. And it is about sharing the land. So the new plan that came out at least recognizes now there are 3 primary nations or interests in this, the British, the American, and the Native. And even the American plan that came out a couple of years ago with showing our wampum belt that forms our confederacy. It says the Haudenosaunee on a great law of peace. That's the first time in 100 years that the United States has acknowledged the term Haudenosaunee in an official capacity. Because they were saying before that they don't exist anymore. They're Americans. But at least through these ironic, okay, it's just a coin. I'd rather have the coin than the promise. But I think it's indicating the times they are changing. So anyway, I want to give you a very quick view of what we would think about that. I appreciate the time that we had here with you today.